the sea at the Copacabana. Look at I'm under the tree. Oh, so hot here.
I know, right? And we have the beautiful tropical rain behind us. So it is Friday night Tiki bar. Yay. So we are enjoying our drinks. Cheers.
Cheers.
I won't touch your glass because I have, so that's okay. We do have the one, the only, the fabulous Mr. Sean Patrick here with us today.
We're excited.
And a Caesar is his drink of choice for this evening. So we're going to find out why he chose the Caesar tonight. His Caesar looks a lot better than mine. Mine is looking a little boring, let's just say, compared to his, but that's okay. All right.
So tell us a little bit about him, or we want him to tell us?
Well, Sean,
How did you meet Sean?
I met Sean at Staples here, like I was in. So we met actually in Oakville, Staples. I don't know. I guess we just started talking. I'm gonna have to ask him because I just feel like I've always known him all of a sudden. Like, how'd we meet? I don't know. We started talking. We would see each other there and just end up in some great conversations. We've recently. He's brought me into a project, one of his clients' projects, to help on the LinkedIn side. So we've just, it's just, and funny, I think it was like many, many, many times after talking, he lives literally a stone's throw away from my house.
A stone's throw?
Literally, I think I could throw a stone at his house.
That's where they got that saying.
Exactly.
Very good.
But I'm going to let Sean actually tell you more about himself.
Awesome.
Instead of me bantering on. So,
all right.
Welcome, Sean.
Yay, Sean. Thank God. Look at that. That's can you hold that up
hang
again?
on. Exactly. Hold that up.
That's a beautiful, beautiful
Oh, look at the glass.
Right?
Oh okay. You definitely outdid me.
This is a last minute thing. I don't know if you saw when I was making my drink, but it's like top shelf, literally. And it was a souvenir of a Caesar my wife got when we used to be sports parents. And all the parents went out during a tournament in Calgary, and there was some joke. But anyways, everyone pitched in. No, they didn't. They stole all the other parents. The joke was so funny. They stole it for her and gave it back to her as a party favor or something.
Awesome.
I love that. That's awesome. But the problem with the
and it
celery,
was around Christmas.
Well, cheers. It's a little hard to drink when you've got that big celery stalk. So I don't know if anybody saw the video.
Hair in the way?
So we did.
Is my hair in the way?
Yeah. So we did post a video on how to make a Caesar because we know it's Canadian, and it had. Oh my goodness, it had a celery stalk in it. It had a slice of pizza. It had, it was a meal literally in a glass. It's amazing. If you could put it on a stick, it was sticking out of this glass.
Awesome. No one likes a meal more than me.
So how did you pick a Caesar? Do you remember the first time you had a Caesar?
Oh yeah. I'm sorry if I don't know if I can divulge.
Okay, without going into too much detail.
No, can I divulge what I learned as soon as I got on this call?
Sure.
What Fay's opinion was?
Yes, go ahead.
She doesn't like Caesars. A lot of people don't like Caesars, and I apologize. I didn't know.
Why are you apologizing?
Don't apologize.
Because I'm Canadian, just like the Caesar.
Well, just like the Caesar, right?
The Caesar.
I call it clam urine.
Very well done. That I think it would sell better if they had the thing. That happened was I actually had to go buy Clamato because of me and my big mouth, and I had all these what flavor do I want? I swear, if you had one that was clam urine, it would sell off the shelf. Just because.
So for those of you who are not in Canada, it is a Canadian drink. It is made for people in the U.S., it's sort of the equivalent of the Bloody Mary, except not tomato juice. It's Clamato juice. So a combination of tomato and clam juice. Hence why Fay is calling it clam.
I don't think I've ever gotten up saying, oh, I can't wait to have a glass of clam juice.
Can I get a cocktail? And be generous with the clam urine. Thank you.
Okay, so tell us your story. Where is the first time you had it?
I remember I was the youngest of 6. I had siblings that were much older than me, and my house was always a big fun house, just even if it was just the family together. And I remember my parents liked Caesars, and they would, it'd be like, "Oh, what are we having today?" Like all of my older family members would always be like, "Oh, what's the drink?" And it would be Caesar, and I would make them from a very young age. I could mix drinks like nobody's business, right? Maybe that's why I measured. Maybe that's how I was trained. Because I was a bartender for a while. We had the anyways, they just liked them. And I remember I would mix all these drinks, and they were really fun to make. Like it was like potion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I just was like, ugh. And then I didn't even like tomato juice at the time. And then something happened one time. I was really hungry, really thirsty. And I like a Caesar, not even for the alcohol.
No, it's very spicy. Like you can make, like there's Tabasco sauce and Worcester sauce and horseradish, like spices and salt and pepper.
Juice. Yeah.
Like there's a lot of flavor. So I think the Bloody Mary is kind of plain. It's not as spicy. So I think that's what I like about it.
Or a little clam.
Or a little clam.
A little protein. I don't know. It's I wouldn't.
And it's rimmed. So I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, I don't rim.
But there's actual Caesar rimming.
You did good. You done good.
So yeah. So really good.
Cheers.
So I love them. They're like they're a kickoff. Like if I'm having a Caesar, it means I'm gonna have at least a couple of glasses of wine with dinner, and after that, who knows? But I won't drink Caesars all night. That's like eating 6 meals.
That would be very filling.
Right?
Very filling.
Yeah, but I bet you a lot of people do.
So Sean, she asked me where we met. I know we met at Staples, but other than we just kind of talked and still connected and stuff like that, I don't really remember this whole meeting.
I was scheduled for my first spotlight. So I was using the Staples space because I'd recently, I work by myself, and I recently had won a somewhat large client, and I had to kind of build a team, and we could all work remotely. And this was in 2019, I believe.
Yeah, this was pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID. I just hate even say that. I just call it before. So I had a team of remote people who were colleagues that I used to work with at various times, and they're really good at what they do. So I would use the space, and then they would come in and we'd have meetings, and it was a client out of the US, so we'd use their spaces and all that stuff. And I guess I talk loud. And do you remember Kapil? Kapil was the community manager there, and he's like, "You know what? You should really think about doing a spotlight." I'm like, "What's a spotlight?" And he goes, "Well, it's presenting." They would use their physical space to do presentations. And I said, "Oh, I taught for 20 years, so sure." So I was signed up for it, and right before I had it, there was like an evening for all of the guest speakers of the local spotlight that Staples would host. And Stacy Maynard was one of the expert presenters.
Yeah. So to give people the background, so Staples, obviously it's I know it's in North America. I don't know if it's in other parts of the world, but they have a co-working space is sort of how they expanded and sort of changed their business model. And then they created the space where they would do informational sessions for the public, which Sean and I both spoke at, and then you could stream it, or they would record it for you. So it was a great opportunity. I actually really liked the space. I remember us going to see it. Fay and I went to see it together when it first opened, and it was a great space. And then, unfortunately,
yeah,
and they had a really great podcast studio, which is one of the reasons. So we've done workshops there. I've done speaking using their space there as well. And then, of course, they also had a podcast studio. So Staples was it was a great space. They did a really good job. So that's where Sean and I met.
And so Sean, you mentioned that you taught for 20 years. I just caught that. What did you teach?
I taught a few things. I actually taught at my alma mater, which is Sheridan College, which is actually in the town that we're in right now. Where actually I think Stacy lives a stone's throw closer to Sheridan than I do. But very well renowned for its animation.
Yes.
A lot of the animators out in California and all those big, George Lucasfilm people, they recruit from there, but I just hung out with those people. Is that cool? So I took graphic design there. So I went there and I took computer graphics, and then went to work, and early on in my career, I kind of moved up very quickly. So I think I was a creative director in a few years. I don't really think I was, but that was my title. And I really didn't, like, I had taught when I was like all summers as a teenager and a student, all that stuff, as a lifeguard and all that stuff. And actually I really liked the teaching. We had 4 hours of teaching every day in the summer. Wow. That was the fun part. Anyway, so I've always loved doing that. And I've been asked to come in and speak to my, how would you say it? My class, the class I took 4 years later.
Right.
And so I did that, and I stayed in touch with my prof, who was a real mentor of mine. And then they asked me to do a few more times, and then they just started asking, would you be interested in part-time? And I said, sure. And started teaching literally like animation and I'll say very front-end programming of like creation of CD-ROMs and interactive presentations and stuff.
Right.
It's the best way to describe it. And then did that, and then it just the program evolved with me, and I evolved with the program. So when I started getting into the web and the power of marketing, and how web was essentially that, I first got into websites and the internet based on the fact that I went from designing and creating CD-ROMs to all that stuff's going to be on the World Wide Web now. It has to be 1/1,000,000th of the size, or no one's ever going to see it. So then I just saw that, okay, that's where everything's going. And I was actually feeling a little bit like I can't relearn all this stuff again, like the coding and all that stuff. And I really said, what's this marketing that's taking off? What's all the rage of market? Because that's basically, the internet was going to be an education portal. It was all this stuff. And all of a sudden where it was really succeeding was as a marketing tool. So I just got really interested in that. And then I changed my career to more, I would say, the creative strategy aspect of marketing for big brands.
That's
digital
awesome.
Marketing. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you fell into it, basically. It wasn't like, I'm going to grow up and be into it.
We didn't know. No. Like that's what people.
I was going to be an artist.
Anybody under the age of 30, they don't understand how like this didn't exist when we were younger. Like we couldn't have said when I grew up I want to do this because it didn't exist.
No.
It wasn't an option.
No.
And that would explain why you're so creative if you're an artist.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think what's so funny, I don't know what made me think about it the other day, but I was thinking, if you wanted to work on a computer, like everybody works on a computer. That was a career decision. What are you going to do? I'm going to work on a computer. So I'm going to take computer science.
Yes.
And I'm going to work in computers. And that's how my mom, to the day she died, God bless her, pretty much she works on computers.
Yeah.
Well, I remember I was just telling my son about like our options in high school and our options in university. And I said, well, one of the classes that I took in high school was typing.
Yeah.
He said, it was a whole course? And I said, yes. I said, but my dad, I remember him saying like, I think the world is going in the computer world. Like, I think it's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
Thanks,
you should
Dad.
probably know how to type.
Right.
Biggest regret. I don't have a lot of regrets of high school because I don't remember them. Not kids. Take typing in high school. Oh wait, it doesn't apply anymore.
They don't take it anymore, so it doesn't matter.
But they don't take it, but they're just naturally fast.
I'm fascinated by how fast my son can type with 2 fingers.
Yeah,
he flies right that keyboard.
I've gotten pretty good, but I've worked with some like tech leads and like really technical people who are like raw coders, and they did have the typing background. It's crazy. It's like if you filmed it, you would think that someone had doctored the film because they're just, and they talk and they're like.
That was my mom. My mom could type at some ridiculous speed. Looking at her thing, because she was a legal secretary back in the day, and she was
using whiteout.
No, she never made a mistake. Oh. She could type like her fingers. You're right. You would think that they were like edited. Like
you're making this up.
Time lapse. Crazy.
Yeah, I used to, and I just no. And I'm not musical. Like none of that sort of. Your fingers doing something while you're doing something else. It's just.
But you were wanted to be an artist, and you were creative.
Yeah.
So what did you envision back then before you ended up in animation?
I actually ended up. I kind of jumped on that bandwagon. I'm not in animation. I'm in graphic design.
Right.
I was just using this. Yeah. So I could always draw. I had honestly, I had a gift for reproducing things. I loved pencil sketches, and I wasn't much of a, say, abstract artist or anything like that. I loved art. I loved art history, all that sort of thing. And it just was like, being the youngest, I think there was no pressure put on me to be anything other than what I wanted to be. Because it's like, I was a surprise, if you can imagine, when my father was 54 and my mother was 39 in 1969.
Yeah.
So it just was like, I just think it was like the pressure was off. I think my parents always saw that there was I loved making things. So my mom was very creative, and she'd cook and she'd do crafts, and I would just do whatever she did.
Right.
And sometimes, like, I would do that with my sisters, and sometimes they would be mad because I'd do it better than they would. And I was like 6, right? And I'd be like, I'm sorry.
We won't tell them. We won't share this video with them.
Okay, good. I signed something, so it's okay. But anyways, yeah, I've just always done that. I'm from a very small town in Quebec, and it just, like, what is it? My father was a pharmacist. My mother was a homemaker.
Yeah.
And it was like, what do you get into? And to me, it was just, okay, well, I tried to always find this path that was art-based. And then just had to get out of the small town. And I had a brother, much older than me, who had gotten a job at Sheridan College in there, like, as a VP. And
it's who you know.
But we didn't even know. I didn't know that graphic design existed in 1986. Graphic design was it existed, but not to the masses.
Barely, not to the degree it does now. Yeah,
they didn't have Mad Men to tell them what what an artist was.
They do graphic design in high school now, right? Which is crazy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, 2 of my nieces are, like, one has graduated, so none of my kids have gotten into that aspect specifically. My son's in architecture, but they were always very averse to doing what mom and dad did because it wasn't cool.
It's not cool.
We worked at home. So it's just been they say it's what I would say is, some great words out there, some great things we've learned from Michael. Oh, what's his name? I should know. But anyways, his book was called The Brand Called You. I think it's Michael Porter. And it's the whole idea that it's no longer a ladder; it's a chessboard. So we're no longer as fussed moving up versus moving to a direction that we want to.
Agreed.
It still gets us to that same level with a much more interesting journey.
Absolutely. And I think that's key. And that's why we like to share everyone's stories, because it isn't. And the kids growing up these days don't even know about the ladder, right? They don't
that's exactly.
Like, they have no clue. And I can remember I was in corporate for 25 years. And my girlfriend that was in the same company as me, we were working hand in hand. She was on a different division, but we went up, we did the ladder, we missed vacations, we did everything to get up there, and we got to the senior leadership team. And I remember turning to her and I'm saying, we jumped through burning hoops for this. like there was no big pot of gold and angels singing. There was nothing. And then it was so.
Except there's more work.
There's more work.
Longer title.
Longer
title.
Longer hours and more work.
So I think it's kind of cool that now, it's you just don't know. Like, somebody with a VP title probably is not making the same amount of money as some freelancer doing, what they want to do at home. So it's really fascinating.
Harder. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, and maybe it sounds like we might have something in common. I mean, take this for what it's worth. I was a VP at 29 and I went to graphic design school. Like, talk about falling in something and, it didn't smell great.
No, it's true. So you get the imposter syndrome going, right? Like, you're
totally did. I went through imposter syndrome for 10 years. And I guess I pulled it off.
Yeah.
But it was the idea. Like, I will say that I was a creative director and then VP at a very young age. I wasn't. Like, I had the responsibility, and I guess I did an okay job. No one knew better. If you were a digital creative, what was anything in digital at the time?
No.
It wasn't even called digital yet.
Right.
So it's the idea that I think we were kind of that generation that the ladder did either you kept on the ladder and went, whoa, shoot, and it was pulled away. But I think I remember when I was doing this personal branding training at the company that I worked at for the junior group, was I had to realize, oh, I have to tell them this so that they even know the difference. But there was that sort of, there were those that had come from the business university grads. There was still some strong sense of that, plus the parental influence that they had. You know, parents heavily influenced their kids post-secondary, and then what goes from there.
I think we missed that. I think my kids missed that boat.
Oh, good. We live in Oakville. Anyways, we didn't. But it was that sort of change. And like you said, Faye, kids, I don't know, my kids are like, what? What's a ladder?
Yeah.
That's true.
I'm going to travel. Or, you know, the idea that you decide where you're going to live first and then worry about what you're going to do. What's that?
Yeah.
No, crazy.
It's an interesting dynamic. I mean, I love it's pluses and minuses, obviously, but I love the fact that they're open to anything. On the flip side, you know, we always talk about it. They have so much information. It's almost like overwhelming.
Very much so.
So but you used to have a path. You know, I didn't have that path. I really didn't. My parents were immigrants. They're blue collar workers. And they didn't tell me to be a doctor or a lawyer. They just, they were happy if I was a secretary. Like, they didn't care. They just said, do what you need to do. Good. Just have a better life than us. Right. So, and I've always brought that on with my kids. Like, I can't tell you what direction to go. You got to figure that out on your own. Right.
Yeah.
So, I love the fact that they have all these opportunities to do things that we never thought we could actually make a living at.
Well, I think it's exciting too, right? To see it can be overwhelming. I know, like, I was literally talking to my dad yesterday on the way up, and I'm like, I had two options. I could take a Bachelor of Arts at this university, or I could take a Bachelor of Science at the same university. Like, those are my two options. And then I took a Bachelor of Science, and he said, why'd you do that? I said, because you said that it was better.
Yeah.
That was my only reasoning.
Yeah.
And I have the degree. Yay. It doesn't mean anything today, but
that's the difference with kids now. The difference is they know that the degree means nothing unless they're going into something specific, like being a doctor or being a lawyer. Because we don't really know a lot of people that do what they went to school for, right?
Not in my cohort.
No.
I guess what I was, I should put some context when I was talking to these kids, but these people younger than me, it was marketing.
Right.
Okay. You'll be shocked how few marketers took marketing.
Right. Oh, hardly any.
Because it's such a broad field. I consider myself a marketer. I have taught marketing for many years, and I didn't go to school for marketing.
Right.
I am an imposter, but I'm a proud one. I think that's the difference.
But it's also life experience. It's job experience. You know, Collins, saying life throws you curveballs all the time, and the opportunity sometimes pops up when you least expect it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's absolutely right.
You got to go with it.
I think what I was always good at was the working hard and working smart towards something. A little bit of a downfall too is I was a workhorse. I could go 2 days of work without sleeping. I could do a third. Now I'm like, is it noon yet? Because I started at 10.
Exactly.
Where's my Caesar?
But I would almost rather I would rather hire somebody or work with somebody who had that on the job training and understanding and implementation of actually doing it versus the school education where it's theory and maybe they don't know how to actually put it together in a business sense, right?
Yes, especially in this field, right? Like, especially in the marketing communications field. And I would say I've had the benefit of working with a lot of people like that. Doers who have just, got a job that interested them. Maybe it wasn't what they'd studied for, but it interested them. And I think that's,
it's an interesting field because it's constantly changing, right? So how do you stay on top of things? Like, how do you go, I need to bring this in?
The best way, earlier on, because I don't stay on top of things anymore. I'm just kidding. Actually, I have an answer to that too. The 20 years of teaching, the biggest reason, because it didn't pay great, and I had a full-time job as a senior person, or worked from home in a business with my wife with 3 small children. It wasn't, it's like people are like, why'd you do it? And I would say it was kind of like my escape, but it forced me to stay because I was teaching. First, I taught user experience. Like that was my expertise. There's creativity, but I developed websites and just the whole, what now is known as UX, which wasn't called that. So there's all that aspect. So I started teaching that. And then I was on the board of whatever it was. And they had said, are there any ideas as to how we can evolve the program? And I said, you know what, marketing is, if we're going towards the web, marketing is kind of a huge answer to the question that is, what does design do for the web? And it's like, it provides or delivers the needs of marketing. So they're like, oh, that's a great idea. So they hired a marketing instructor, and she was great, and she was very young. And after years, she was like, are you kidding me? I can't do this. And then they said, well, Sean, you do. It's your idea. You do it. And I had just started.
Be careful what you say.
Yeah. It'll bite you nowhere. And so I just said, okay. I knew enough about, I was working in marketing. So then next thing I know, I'd already been teaching for about 5 years. So then I was teaching 2 courses, 1 each semester. And it was right at that time where there were years I had to rewrite the first half of the course year over year. Or I should say the second half, it depended. But basically what was really good about that was it forced me to go deep into marketing. Not marketing like marketing is, Twitter and social. And it was like, do you know what marketing is? You know what the word means? Like what is a market? The first thing that pops in your head, unless you work at the TSE or anything like that, is it's a place where people communicate and trade their wares. So I'd always say, like, you're from the country, you come to the local market, you have chickens, but you need milk.
We have chickens.
See? So, but when people kind of go, oh, because there's often I would say, a negative connotation to marketing, or it's used as a negative connotation to the bad aspects of advertising. I don't disagree with that, but the thing is, it's not marketing that's bad. It's the way it's people's intention with marketing, right? Companies' intentions with
people use marketing, unfortunately,
for exploitation. But we never consider.
But my marketing to me is like so exciting, like, because it is always changing. So what?
And that's the aspect where it's still the same basis. There's just different ways to tell that story, to meet up, to exchange value. That's what's always changing, but it's that same thing, and we'll always be conversing. And that's what, and then now this year has been very exciting for me with Wiseguy starting, because even I have kind of taken a step to say, that was the catalyst. This past year has been the catalyst to show how much can change that quickly. But guess what? It's not that different. So it's like, yes, like you said, Fay, how do I keep up? You take that information in and you just kind of step back and don't get all excited about the next big thing that happened. Kind of look at, this is exciting. Can I think of a good metaphor or something similar that may have happened through the same sort of process that is marketing?
So you alluded to Wiseguy. I don't know much about it. That's your new company, I guess?
Yeah, so I've got one company, Patrick Paradisi Inc., with my wife, Simone, who's a brilliant designer, who I met at said school. And so we started off a company a long time ago, and I would go back into agency and all that sort of stuff. And we just use the company for what it best serves. So Simone does a lot of traveling. She does a lot of live events. She just went with the time when she couldn't travel. She took on a lot more print design and web design, and now she's traveling again. And then I would do my thing, and it's done very well for us. It's basically just a small creative agency. We'll occasionally hire freelancers, but we typically take on projects that we can, for the most part, handle ourselves. Probably around 10 years ago, when I joined a very large organization as the digital creative VP,
the guru.
The guru. it was an opportunity for me because I'd kind of hit that sort of, okay, what next? From
Right.
there's only so much design and user experience and all that sort of stuff. And even I got into creative direction and the pitching and all that stuff. And it's like, what next? It was a huge opportunity for me to really understand operations. Like, how does a business work? How does a business make money? Because in my world, it was like, more money, you hit that point where you can't charge anymore an hour.
Right.
And you can lie about the time it takes until that client says, I'm sorry, I'm giving this to you tonight at 10, but you need to deliver it tomorrow at 8. I'm like, well, how am I going to lie that it took 48 hours? Because that's what it should have taken, right?
Exactly.
I was good at math in high school.
Yeah.
And it just was like, I really struggled with the math. So I just started to kind of go like, I thought business was very complicated, and I wasn't wrong, because business in some cases, especially at that time, had gotten more complicated than it needed to be. The art of making money in business had very little to do with reward for effort and talent.
Right. Agreed.
Right. And that was just the equation I've always worked by.
Yeah.
However, it was working against me. So then all these years and figuring it out and starting different companies and leading other organizations and then being on my own for a long time, things really started to kind of settle. And then for the last couple of years, I've been thinking, okay, there's something I want to kind of try out on my own sideline. So that my wife and I, we run our business. It does very well. She's very successful. She never has to pitch a job. It just floods in. She gets her year booked. We're living a good life.
Yeah.
We don't want for much. We're also not particularly.
You can afford drinking Caesars every day.
Okay. As my teeth are like rotting. Yeah. Every morning I brush my teeth with Clamato. So anyways, then I just said, I want to do something different. And I've been on this path, and Wiseguy was me becoming, I had to think about what was most frustrating about my frustrations. And it was coming from big agencies. So maybe we should say that. I worked at companies where I worked on big brands,
right?
In a digital creative director capacity. Sometimes often being the role of strategy, but often working with strategists. And, beer companies. So like, I'll say Budweiser, but like AB InBev, Anheuser-Busch, Coca-Cola, Loblaws, Walmart, Microsoft. And it was like all you kept doing, especially in my role, okay, if we have an opportunity, we got to pitch it, we got to make it big, and we got to win it. And sometimes we'll execute it, was the impact. Even if you won something, rarely did it ever just even carry through.
Right.
By the time the gestation of the project was done, the baby didn't look the same at all.
Right.
I think that's just it was an ugly baby that I did not learn anything.
It's an ugly baby.
No.
Seinfeld, right? Are we doing a Seinfeld episode? Ugly baby. To the point where there was just like, I would be very proud of winning clients or a project, but I would never claim having anything to do with what ended up happening.
Which is very, and you know what? I can
Does that
relate.
work? No,
I can relate. I can relate. I've had clients that, I've tried to make sure they know what my vision is and what I can make them look like, and and then they're adamant about doing something else, and then I don't want to tell anyone that I worked with them because I don't like what they chose.
It's an ugly baby.
That was about 10 years of my career. So I had a pretty small portfolio. And then I would often be assigned to winning the business, the pitching. I love pitching. And what I love about pitching, which is when I learned how strategy was actually my thing, is I don't want to sit in a room and just come up with ideas all the time. I'm not an ideator. Right. I'm a fact finder. So what really gets me going is help me understand what your challenges are. And my first act is to just go and do research and figure things out and talk to people so that I do identify the problem. My creativity is in solving the problem before others might even think of, okay, so now how are we going to be creative about it? To me, it's just this process. Right. So with that frustration and then taking on smaller projects on my own, taking them beginning to end, I mean, they all have their frustrations, but it was that idea of, I'm given big challenges, but I'm frustrated when it makes minimal to no impact.
Right.
Even though I got paid, even though, I enjoyed the journey, whatever. And I think that I made that shift where, just out of need too, I was like, in the community, smaller businesses would say, well, can you help me out? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. I'm not cheap, I would say, but I was like, but I'm good. And, I would always work to, what do you look, because I'll always say, I think, Stacy, you do the same thing. So what are you trying to do? Right? We need a website. You do a website? Well, like, yes. I'm like, what is the website for? And then they kind of look at me like, do I have the right number? And it just would be like, well, I'm not doing a website for someone who doesn't know why they want a website. It just needs to win them business. It's going to make them famous. And so I really got to that. I guess it was that osmosis of how business works, and to truly build a business that draws revenue and maximizes profit and maintains high margins. These were all things that were like, what? I charge you an hourly rate. I milk you by an hourly rate. You take me off, and I increase my hours when you take me. Like, I hate to say it, but that's kind of the economy of the rush freelance world.
Right.
And all I'll say is everyone's playing. I don't think anyone. I don't see too many victims, and I mean that in a good way. Is it plays itself out, and some people at some point, including me, at some point say, you know what, I can't play this game anymore.
Right.
I'm out. Literally being, it's half the work. Half the work is just staying in the game and like you said, Fay, playing.
Right.
So I think with me
trying
now,
to get the clients to buy in too, because I know it's, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't always make them drink. So even though in the beginning they agree we're going to do all of this stuff, but it also takes them their part to implement, and they need to put their effort into it. And sometimes they don't. And that can be very frustrating.
Really, Stacy? What do you mean?
And that's when you fire your clients.
Yes.
And that was the other thing. It was that trail of fired clients. And I wouldn't say it was, it was what I learned was iterative. Okay. So first thing is, and this is like why Wiseguy exists, is I'm a consultant mainly, or coach, depending on how much you want to spend. That's there if it's this. The position statement is, if you're struggling, if marketing is important as a next step to the growth of your successful business, and have even dipped your toe in the water and are not feeling what the right thing to do is, come talk to me.
Right.
Because I will not sell you my services. My services is talking to me, understanding what you can do. And what I deliver back to my clients is not what they hoped for. It's what they need and what they can manage. I don't I'm in and out. Right. So yes, I'll have sometimes a 1-year engagement, but I always have to know my job is, I call it the cleaner, right? If you're a Nikita fan, but not Harvey Keitel type, but I'm the cleaner. I just come in, I understand everything that's going on. I understand roles, functions, who's going to do this. Like when I do all this, who's going to be responsible? Because in the world of digital, you can't make something and walk away from it. You can't paint your front sign of your store and repaint it 8 years later. I mean, Stacy, I think that's pretty much you're saying, right? And that happens before the project's even complete. They're leaving it out to dry.
Yeah.
So with me, it's about, I created a sort of discovery phase. So it's really helped me package. So I guess if this is sort of like helping small businesses, sometimes when you struggle with things, think like those situations going, and it's hard to do, think on the client side. Okay, wait a minute. I'm frustrated with them. I'm guessing they're frustrated with me. How do we fix this? Right? Like, and it takes a lot of trial and error. And with me, and I think Stacy, you do a really good job with it too, is to say, package number one, let's have make them pay for your time. So they even understand that that's what they're paying for, And I start with free hour, free 30 minutes, because I love talking to people. And I know I can help anybody in 30 minutes. In some way, shape, or form. So that's free. And it was a great filter for me in knowing that at one point through my marketing, I was attracting the wrong audience. Next it was like, I don't know if this is it the partnership? So, I had partnered with Staples, nothing against Staples at all. They're wonderful, but they were actually more the, I would say a smaller business, not a business who needs the kind of expertise that I provide. So that was good learning for me. And then, so just a lot of learning. And in what I do, I had to really like force myself to say, remember, wait for the results, analyze the results, and just adjust. So it didn't mean I threw everything out, and so pulled things back. Now, one thing that happened was as I was about to set, Wiseguy was going on pretty full, and I just booked a bunch of sessions with Staples and Spotlight, and it was going great. And then Stacy came in, talked, and she's talking about this podcast thing, and I'm like, what? And one of the lead strategists that I had working with me at Staples at the time, we'd made the jokes like, there's a beautiful podcast studio, and we're kind of like you two. Me and Lindsay are kind of like you two. I think you'd say the same, Stacy, right? Like we're just
Lindsay is his podcast partner, and also you work with her as well, right? Like she comes in.
Yeah, we do a lot of projects together. She's done work for me, but we kicked off a podcast after I went to.
We love Lindsay. You would love Lindsay.
She is. Everybody loves Lindsay.
Yeah, she's
it's a show.
Yeah, we'd have her on. She'd have a good drink.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. She'd have like a fancy hootie tootie. Like she'd have the shaker out.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
There'd be no clams involved. No goats. No, turtles. Nope. It's a regular drink. Vegetables.
Well, now you're getting judgy. I think a goat. I think we could do a lot with a goat, but I'll just leave it at that.
Now I'm not judging your taste.
But anyway,
I am judging your taste. But I'm not.
You are literally judging my taste. Anyways, all that to say is, a year in, we have just completed yesterday our first season with 27 episodes of our podcast.
What is your podcast called?
It's called The Two Marketeers. We are on YouTube now. If you Google The Two Marketeers on YouTube, you'll see a few, but hopefully you'll see the one with my face and a nice logo. We're just starting out. I'm happy to say Stacy has been a great guide along the journey. All I can say is, that is actually as a result of me saying, I think I need to, how do you find the right people? I got tired of so much filtering, and I knew why is because I wasn't putting enough out there. Right. As a marketer, I was not putting anything out there for anyone other than the people I knew. We do that sometimes. I say that small businesses is you start your business and you share it with all your friends, and then you finally realize, wait a minute, my friends aren't my audience. Like I know they're going to say nice things, but they're not my audience.
No.
And even I had to go through that, and I'm like, no, I'm talking to someone very different. So we're
always fascinated when people like they start a business or they want to learn something, and then they go to their friends for advice. And it's like, well, as long as they like it. And it's like, but they're not your people. No. They're not your business
They're
people.
never going to say they don't like it.
Yeah, they're not your
Unless
client.
They're not real friends and they don't want you to be successful.
Yeah.
But other than that.
Exactly.
Wow. I need another drink. No. So it's been a great journey. And now I'm like, we're just wrapping up our first season.
That's great.
Big check mark, because after 2 recordings and 1 spotlight event, COVID started. And again, we adjust, we show our resilience, and I know how to edit sound, video. I always kind of knew, I always dabbled in whatever, but YouTube star now, or a YouTube admin star. It's a very different level. So I'm having, and what I'll say is a year in, and we are having a blast. It is not work. So,
and that's the key, right?
The key. Exactly.
But I think, for me, I think there is a like an arc to your story, and it seems to be, the biggest personality piece in everything you've done is you don't seem to have ever been afraid to do anything. So whether it's like, baking with your mom, or whether it's doing something that you have no idea what you're doing, and being the VP, and like you're just not afraid. And I think that so why do you think that is part of your personality? Like, what gave you that when you were growing up, do you think? Because a lot of people are not like you, and they're afraid of everything.
Yeah, that's why I always hate telling my history, because it sounds so heroic, and it's really not. Because there's a lot of fear. No. I appreciate what you're saying. It's just you're right. I don't, when big shit happens, and pardon my language, but when the big shit happens, fear is gone. It's when nothing's happening is when I start being. So if work is fine, and the family's fine, everything's fine, and I'm bored, then I get fearful to try something new. Right. But I think when I know, and maybe it is, I mean, I've had some challenges.
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, everyone does, but it's like, yeah, my mother, you know, pretty much raised me on her own. My dad passed away when I was pretty young, and never, you know, she grieved and never needed anyone else, never wanted, lived a full life, passed away just last year and lived a very full life and said, I'm done. Like I've lived a very full life. So I think there's just she was, I would see a lot of, if the way you described me, I would have described my mother and she would have had the same reaction going, what do you mean fearless? Like I'm a mess. But when the shit is real and when it's clear, or when an opportunity is real, like I'm like, I will go. Like if the opportunity is any better than what I'm leaving,
right?
You know, from it, like a life, like I've made, you know, I almost, well, I'll say fearless to my own demise, right? So I very early, I went for money, I got it, and it's a very similar situation to your scenario, Faye. We wanted to be here, like I was like, I didn't understand their language. Net, bottom line, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
You get in these meetings and all they would talk about is who went to what company. And I was like, who cares? Because that wasn't, I came up in the design world. Like we all worked together. We drank together.
Exactly.
The better we worked together, the better the work was. So,
That's so true.
Yeah. So yeah, it's, I will attribute a lot to my mother.
That's great.
A lot to my mother. Yeah.
There's
and my wife. I married my wife. I married my mother. I married my mother. I know it doesn't sound right, but I guess it's healthy when I adore my mother, but my wife is the same.
Yeah.
Fearless.
And I do think, I believe that that's part of it. I mean, the fact, like we are privileged if we have role models that we can grow up with. We're privileged because so many people don't. So the fact that you had somebody to, you know, and that's what I always aspire to. I want to be able to, you know, set an example for my kids so that they don't have to, you know, later in life blame me for stuff.
You have to give them a reason to talk, a thing to talk about in therapy. Come on.
I'll send my bill. Yeah, and I think what's interesting about that is, you know, it's because I've been a mentor to many and love doing it and take it very seriously. I think it's why I taught for so darn long, because I changed people's lives. It was a postgraduate program 1 year, a lot of new Canadians, and it was their ticket. And they had to get a job within 4 months of when they graduated. And it was a great program. And I taught with my mentor. I think the one flaw I'll say with mentorship is that sometimes the thought of the mentor is based on, well, this is who you will be, so you should. Right. Do you know what I mean? It's that same sort of misconception of, oh, well, then it should be a person, you know, who's in that department, who's done it, and they could be totally different people. And I remember, because I worked at a company that did a mentorship program, and they were really good at, I mean, they'd assign, but they would listen, right? They would kind of see, okay, how's it going? And they cared more about the mentee and how they were doing, which was good. I'm not gonna lie, it was forced on the older, sorry, I said the older, on the mentors, which bothered me, that some people feel that that's a duty. And they used it, you know, they exploited it in bad ways. And I mean that only in that sort of like, did it for themselves, like didn't improve the business, or they were giving work to their mentees who didn't even work for them. They were giving them projects to do for themselves, all that stuff. Right. But that's what I liked about, so I started getting these, I don't want to say they were the ones who rejected their mentors from totally different, because I scored quite high, because I'm like, I don't care who you are or what you want. I'm just here to listen. Like, I'm fascinated by people. Like, I think the other thing is I'm not fearless. I'm easily fascinated. I'm very easily wowed by information I didn't have a minute before.
Right.
I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's where the strategy comes. I think that's where, like, Lindsay and I we're hilarious. We know we're the only two people who are who think we're funny, but like we'll say like,
Like
oh my God,
We think we're hilarious too. It's okay.
perfect, we should hang out. So like we'll be going through data and we'll be like, oh my gosh, and the other one go, I know what you mean. Line 4, yeah. Stat 3, yeah. And we're both going like, and other people are in the room going, what? We're like 42% of da are a da da da, and then we're like, that's it. We're like cheering, and people are like, we have no idea what you're talking about.
But
Back
they
it
think
up.
we're talking in code.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I guess we are.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I like the fact that you, again, sort of talked about marketing as a whole, because I feel like in the world of today, digital marketing, unfortunately, when you say the word marketing to a small business, they think social media.
Right.
And they don't understand. Like I know when because I mean, when I started my business, I've told the story before, but as soon as someone found out I knew about marketing and branding and online stuff, it's like, okay, well, forget everything else. Like that's what I need to understand, because I don't know what, and I was fascinated when I started, meeting people at this co-working space, and it's like, do you understand the concept of brand consistency? And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, wow. So I really had to go back to true basics. And it was something that I just assumed everyone knew. So again, understanding what marketing is.
Yeah, and I did too. In that context, luckily, I had to take on a job that was people who had they were like recent graduates of college or university who had very little exposure. So I was able to start at the beginning. It took me about 10 years in the business to realize that I had to somehow take that and not make it dumbed down, seem as dumbed down, and use like metaphors and say, think of your brand as sort of like a projection of your company. It's like a logo. Yeah. There's always like a yes and yes and.
Yeah, I just tell people the truth. I just say this, you don't know what you're talking about. This is what you should do.
Then you just finish saying, you need to talk to Sean.
My assumption is honestly, I think 99% of the time is my assumption is most people that you're talking to, whether it's, one-on-one personal branding or whether it's a large corporation, they really don't know what they're looking for. Right? They don't really know. So they know they need something, but they don't know what it is. So if you just treat everybody as they don't really know, then it's a lot faster to get to the truth, right?
Yeah, and I think that's part of my decision was, but you never will when you're dealing with a large company where everyone's just trying, like, hey, we all try to protect ourselves. But you could say back exactly what they just said, and maybe with a bit of a tone, and be like, so you're telling me that you want this, but you can't do that. And there's no way you have the money to do that, but I have to do it for that and that, right? And they'll be like, yes. And you do the whole, it's that crazy, because it's just this big, powerful, crazy thing.
Yeah, I can remember when I worked in corporate and, I ran international marketing and retail. And so when I worked in corporate, though, I can remember consultants pitching us and they would give us whole decks and it didn't say anything. Nothing that we cut. And then, the president or the HR, whoever would be like, don't you love them? And I'm like, what are we buying?
I don't understand.
So it's a different world. And yes, big bloated companies are still like that. But hopefully, I think what I'm seeing is as these younger people go into it who don't know about the ladder, who don't need to be politically correct, right? They're questioning because they grew up questioning.
Very true.
Right? They do not take authority just at word, right?
Yeah. I worked a lot on research for Gen Z and for a lot of my smaller clients who are I love, because it's all there, guys. It's on Google. It's public domain information you can get. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And they're just very together people. Like, I just think it's so funny. Maybe I've done that so much that we go out with friends who have kids about our age, or maybe a bit young, about our kids' age, or a bit younger, and they'll be like, I'll hear them, and maybe it's fresh in my mind about like, the fascinating thing about Gen Z is this and this. Yeah. That's my eldest daughter is like total, like, starting the workforce. Gen Z, just graduated from university, And I see, and I think I've always done this, especially with younger generations. I've looked at younger generations with greater admiration
Absolutely.
versus what will tend to be like, oh, kids these days. I mean,
No.
as a parent, my kids these days, yeah, that's different. But younger generations in general is fascinating to me. And that's
Yeah.
my whole point, of to see everything that they're doing. All you have to do is say, but why do you think that is? And then you just kind of go, they grew up with a phone in their hand. Yeah, well, we put it there. Like,
Yeah,
exactly.
just that whole sort of accountability. But they're wonderful, wonderful people who are better people than we were.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be interesting to exactly, and what they're going to invent, what they're going to be able to accomplish. To think about the fact that they might have a job that hasn't been invented yet is scary. I mean, with us,
I think of the movies that were popular when, you know, we were teenagers or young adults, and I'm embarrassed because I wanted to be Ferris Bueller. I wanted to be rich. I wanted that car. I wanted, you know, I wanted to be Tom Hanks and big because he had so much money. Like, everything was about money.
Yes.
If you had, like, that was that, you know, cocaine and money.
Movies were like that, though. The move, that's what they highlighted, was in order.
Right. So it's always a great indicator of society, right? And if you have, like, Nomadland is what everyone's watching right now, and like, it's just, it's an amazing time right now, and I it's been very humbling for me, and it's perfect timing. One thing I've become a lot less fearful of, as much as I'm fearless, but I'm even more fearless now, is putting myself out there and not worrying about fucking up.
Yeah.
Right. Being very careful and conscientious and all those things, but letting myself just, and that's what a podcast is it not? Right. Like, and then going live, but I've become a lot more vulnerable, allowed myself to be more vulnerable. And it's actually that is much truer to who I am versus the professional persona I always maintained.
Which everyone was told to do. So you were not supposed to say what you did on the side, and you weren't supposed to do any of that stuff. And now, you know, anything that somebody wants to find out about you, they can. So why worry about it? Like, that's what I always think. Why worry about it? Because, you know, if they want to find, that's why we do our hot topics on 3 times a week. We just talk about anything we want because it doesn't matter. You know,
people find us entertaining, apparently.
Yeah, if they don't like it, they can turn us off. It's not that big a deal anymore, right?
I think it's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating, but on the on the marketing side, when we're talking about kids, what I find interesting, and I think you might come across this sometimes as well, is the little things. So as we're trying to work out marketing strategies and that for an organization, I think about the kids when Stacy and I both have 16, 17-year-olds, and they'll say, what's the time, and we'll say 2:45, and they'll be like, what? What is that? What does that
mean? They don't like driving my car. Sorry, I'm sweating because I have lights on. I call it the buffet egg roll effect. I'm like an egg roll in a tiny buffet. It just happened because my son doesn't like borrowing my car.
Yeah.
He likes using my wife's car, and he complains about it because I have an analog clock.
Right.
Because you say don't look at my phone. And we have a giant, beautiful analog clock in our kitchen. It goes with the decor.
Yes.
And my daughter just said it the other, and it faces you, and they'll be like, if you face one way, that's the only clock you see. Everything behind you would be digital. The fridge or the the microwave, the stove.
Yeah, everything.
My daughter's like, what time is it? I said, it's right in front of you. She's like, she's 15. God bless her. And she's like, I don't know how to read that.
No, they don't. But what's the fascinating piece of that? This is what I love about it, though. There's nothing wrong with that. You're right. They don't need to know. No. But as marketers, as people that work with brands, we need to understand that, because if we put that out, they'll be like, what?
Why would you do that?
Why would you go with that brand?
Yeah. A marketer, I mean, you'll say that to everybody. You have to stay on top of what's happening. You know what was fascinating? I just had an experience today where my son is moving from one apartment to another. So he goes to university in the city, and he found a new apartment, and he said they can't rent the truck, right? They're not 21 or 25, whatever it is. So I said, yeah, I'll look into it and all that stuff. So I go on the U-Haul site, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's pretty nice. And I do come from UX, so I appreciate a user experience I don't notice. Does that make sense to you?
That's absolutely.
What I would always
so do we. So do we.
Our UX students would always, I'd say, as it relates to UX, and actually in a lot of design, if you do your job well, no one notices.
Right.
And they're like, right. It's like, you do your job well, you make your job invisible.
Yeah.
So I went on, and it was great. And then I'm sort of like, okay, how do I price it? And I know we're going like 2 blocks in the city and all that stuff. But I'm like, yeah, but there's going to be like loading docks and all that stuff. So I'm trying to figure it all out. Here's what was brilliant. When they give you, and it totally speaks to what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
When we used to buy them, you would be given, or rent them, you'd be given like, oh, there's the cube van, there's this. You wouldn't see pictures of them if you were lucky.
Yeah.
And they give you measurement, cubic measurement, right? In feet or meters, whatever. So you'd be like, oh, and all of it was price. All of it was price. So as I'm looking to kind of think, I know they don't need a lot because they're in a furnished apartment.
Right.
However, they have to move into an unfurnished apartment. Therefore, that's why I got it. Like we might have to go out and pick up a few things. The trucks are labeled by the size of an apartment.
Wow.
What?
So instead of saying, small cube van, it's like bachelor to 1-bedroom apartment.
Wow, that's smart.
Brilliant. So they have changed.
Is it not?
That's so
That's
smart.
awesome.
I would love that.
But good
and
for
I'm
them.
Sorry, but I had to notice going, this is freaking brilliant.
Because that shows
like,
that they know what they're doing, because
know
that
their
makes
market.
sense
They
to
know their
people who are
target
renting.
They know their market. And it even went to like 2-bedroom apartment family, 3-bedroom house. Like, it's a start. You're just pricing. But I bet you most people wouldn't even have noticed it, because let's think of a lot of it would be first time moving or anything like that. But Faye, that's exactly, that is what you have to do. You have to know your customer. You don't give me an analog time if I'm 20 years old, even if I can read it.
And I'll tell you, it's funny because we always talk about it because they're friends and they're the same age. And it's funny because they'll ask you what time it is, and you'll always look at the wall, and they'll be, it's on your computer.
It's the best punchline.
I cannot break that. I cannot break it
because too hard. I'm wondering what time it is. I'll pick up my phone. I could look.
The thing is if I see a digital, if I see the digital, it's funny you're saying this because it's so that's the other part. I love the psychology of all of this, right? If I see a digital readout, I almost feel like someone says, what time is it? I just say what I see, 8:03.
Yeah.
Okay. So if someone asked me again a minute later and I wasn't looking at it, say, what time is it? I'd be like, I have no clue.
Exactly.
My brain, but when I see an analog, because of just the imprinting or whatever, and that's why we say a quarter. That's just how we think. But it's that idea. It's the amount of times where I'd say, like, what time is it? And someone would say, I'm like, what time is it? And I'll be like, 2 minutes since the last. Like, I'd rather say 2 minutes since the last time, because don't ask. I don't know relative to what.
No, it's true. It's true. But it's a.
So that was a great.
It's a visual thing, right? I can look at the clock and I immediately know what time it is when I look at, which I'm looking right there, which is an analog clock. I know immediately. With digital, I feel like I still have to think about it for a minute, because it's like 8:04. Okay, it's like
what
5
is that?
after. Yeah, I still visualize the analog clock, and I can't get around that. But you know what I mean? There's so many generational stuff, but I'm with you. Like, I am fascinated. Like, I'm so excited to see what they're going to do. I love watching them grow and change and learn, because they have so much access to information. The conversations that you can have now are so much different than when I was their age, because I just didn't have access to the same information. The only information I knew was what my parents told me.
Right. And
it was just, one-way conversation versus a two-way. So it's fascinating.
So for me, it's really interesting because like we all, we understand in marketing and the importance of list building and having your clients and all of those things. But my son, his business is YouTube, and he has a big account with 500,000 subscribers. And I'm always trying to get him to build his list. And he's like, but my people don't have emails that they look at. Like my people
Thanks,
are subscribers.
Mom.
I don't need their email. And it's an interesting piece to really think about, because it is, you might have a lot of followers, your podcast clients or your podcast listeners might not want any information from you on your email. They want the information as you're doing your podcast, or they might want the information on YouTube. So we have to adjust to all of those changes on a rapid basis, because, if your podcast gets big, they're going to say, well, where's your TikTok? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, like, I'm literally going through this now where the whole first season, again, it wasn't the first season until my brilliant friend Stacy Maynard said, you gotta end the season and launch like a new season. The whole first while was, let's just see if we can do this. Let's just make sure we don't sound terrible. Let's see if people like it. Let's see if we continue to enjoy it. And let's see if I can figure out the technology and all that stuff. And then we just 27 episodes later, I'm like, we're both like, we think we got this. And even with COVID, then we're like, hey, we're two strategists. We've done the brand, we've done all this. We created a brand called the Two Marketeers, but I'm the first at fault. We really just created a logo. That said, is we'd written sort of like all the required sort of, this is who we are. And it was our personal brands. But we really realized that we had kind of were like, whoa, now if we want to do this, and this is why hearing that wrap a season, because now we can be totally focused on the other platforms we knew we had to be on. Because our biggest struggle was, I don't know if the Two Marketeers as a brand is that its most appealing audience is podcast listeners, believe it or not, right?
Yeah, no,
so
absolutely.
It's to say, we're not walking away from that. So we did our research and we said, what's there and where else can podcasts be? And then it's like, well, the highest consumption of podcasts is on YouTube. So how do podcasts live on YouTube? Well, they can be just, there should be some kind of movement, but people will just listen to them if there's just a still. Okay, great. But here's the thing. When it comes to more broad sort of content on YouTube usage, your average YouTube video of high consumption is 5 to 7 minutes.
Right.
So what we've then done is said, okay, we have to try a lot of different assets. We've started Zooming our calls, like we do our
Zooming, it's become a verb.
Who's Zooming who, said Aretha. So, but anyways, so we started doing this, make it more complicated. But then it's like, okay, I think we hit that hump. But we're very excited because that same amount of recording, with a little bit more work, is creating a whole different realm of content with different topics, appealing to different people.
Totally different people.
All within a target that we said we want to reach. But people, because they used to have to do a marketing plan in my class. And the first thing I'd say, by year 2 or 3 of teaching, I said, you have to define your target audience. Rule number 1, it is not 8 to 80. Everyone between 8 to 80 and their dog is not allowed.
I love that.
It didn't matter.
Who's your target? Everybody. Everyone can benefit from what
everybody.
What kind of business person would I be if I excluded anyone from the possibility of enjoying my product?
Exactly.
I love that. What could I be thinking?
No.
That's good.
What a failed business person.
Yeah, I hear you. We hear it all the time. We hear it all the time.
I recently, so like even now with Wiseguy, where, I've been focusing on Two Marketeers. With Wiseguy, I'm, so now that's in place because my Wiseguy brand is the presence on the Two Marketeers. So I'm Sean Patrick Wiseguy. So Lindsay, my co-host, comes at it from, she still works on big clients, big clients and exciting stuff. And she's pure strategy.
She's awesome.
I come from, we used to work together. But now I've kind of gone away and done the small business thing. So, and my take as Wiseguy is providing big industry intelligence to small business minds. And really, the only reason to do that is to give people the confidence to make an informed decision about what they should do in marketing, right? Do you, like Stacy said, why do you need to be on social? I think you're just trying to, you know what I mean? Like, I think a Facebook page would do it. Well, that's social. But it'd be like, how about a flyer? Like, you're a restaurant and you're looking for local business. So it's just funny how my whole thing is, it's about, when did marketing get so complicated? And there is an answer to that. It always gets complicated, and that's where we get tripped up. If we bring it back to just a need, an opportunity to satisfy that need, I'm going backwards here, opportunity to satisfy that need, and everything that happens to bring these two together so that need is satisfied. It's like, it's the most simple way, but that's why marketing is so broad. It's logistics, it's distribution, but for me, it's all about what we call marcom, right? Marketing and communications, getting awareness of your product. But now it's just gotten so exciting, especially with all the COVID stuff, where our podcast episode yesterday was about, what's the thing that resonated the most of all the topics we talked about and seemed to be a thread. And it's, as marketers, and I always had a passion for branding. Actually, branding was my way into marketing, but it just has bubbled up to the top that branding is the most important part of marketing right now, more than ever, and brand purpose at every level. So when everyone's scrambling to figure out, including me, am I going to be ready for whatever's next? Like, how am I, everything's up, down, whatever. How am I going to be ready? And you're going to be in competition with a lot of other brands, and those brands can be individuals, competition. And before you go on telling everyone what you're going to do, you need to be very true to yourself and your company and big companies. What is your purpose? What is your why? And it doesn't have to be big, right? It doesn't have to be big, but it's your why. Okay, well, what's Wiseguy here for? I'm here to help small business owners feel a little less stressed about where they'll spend their marketing dollars.
Right. That's
changing the world. I'm lowering stress.
Nice.
Very nice.
One Caesar at a time.
There we go. Mic drop. Okay. On that note, I just have to say thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was a perfect way of ending it. And I thank you again for bringing the Caesar into our world. It made for very entertaining conversations earlier today when I was pouring it. And highly entertaining.
And if any one of our viewers wants to get in touch with you, they can visit you at...
Oh, so many options.
I thought that was going to be the easy question
too.
What do you recommend? I would say Sean at wiseguyinc.ca is my email.
Okay. Do you have a website?
Wiseguyinc.ca.
Awesome. Perfect. And then we can tell them to look at the two marketeers for your podcast. Yeah.
Just Google
and
us.
On YouTube.
You'll find us. And we're on Apple. See, I told you I had a problem with this. iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the big ones. Just Google the Two Marketeers podcast, and we should be there.
And unfortunately, because Stacy's so good at SEO, now when somebody Googles clam urine, you're gonna stop. Sorry about that.
You know what? That's just a big East Coast thank you. I'm using it.
Thanks, Sean.
I'm trademarking it.
Thank you. It's been a blast. Thanks so much.